Everyone always asks, who's your daddy? But no one ever asks, how's your daddy? Today, it's time for someone to ask the question no one's dared to ask before. How is your daddy? Your Demolition daddy. The film Demolition Daddy came out in 2000 and tells the story of Demolition Dan and Mike, the serial killer.
Nice time.
The film is presented as a Tarantino-esque narrative in which we follow multiple protagonists throughout one fateful day. But I'm not here to give you my thoughts on the film itself, as I have already done that in the past. No. Today we're taking a closer look at the characters of Demolition Daddy and examining what drives them, who they are, and most importantly, how they are. Demolition Dan. Demolition Dan is the big boss of Dan's Demolition Company, and at first glance seems to be a force to be reckoned with.
We'll see who closes who down.
Dan presents himself as a tough, dominant alpha male. He does what he wants to who he wants.
What are you doing, sir? Shut the fuck up.
The film showcases this by placing Dan above other characters in most shots, such as here and here. This is a not too subtle way to show that Dan thinks of himself as above other people. But is any of this really Dan? Once we dive under the surface of Demolition Dan, a new, shall we say, demolished picture forms. Dan is a broken and defeated man. He's taking on a job his company can't possibly complete, and they're now on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yeah, I'm closing you down.
Yeah, Dan's Demolition Company kinda sucks. We can also infer that Dan is not too bright. Why? Well, he's the boss of a demolition company, and they're building a house. Obviously, they're way behind schedule, but instead of working hard or trying to make amends, Dan spends his days locked away in his trailer, watching workout videos. This is a textbook example of depression. Depression is a mental state of low mood and aversion to activity. Depression affects a person's thoughts, behavior, feelings, and sense of well-being. With depression, experiences that would normally bring a person pleasure or joy now gives reduced pleasure or joy, and the afflicted person often experiences a loss of motivation or interest in those activities.
Oh man, could I use a blowjob?
Dan tries to put on a tough exterior, but as we see later in the film, when Mike, pretending to be Dave, confronts him, Dan is very timid and insecure.
Well, I come here for my money.
Oh, yeah. I'm getting it together. Why don't you take a look at the work that's been done so far around here?
Yeah, well, I'll have a look around. When I come back, have my money ready for me.
The cracks are showing, and Dan feels powerless. This is something he takes out on a poor paperboy in a classic case of misplaced anger. Dan is angry with himself, but he can't face the truth, and Hans is the scapegoat. By the end of the film, he puts on a tough face for one last time, while trying to intimidate Mike.
But first we're gonna have a little fun.
But instead, he ends up dead in a dumpster. So, how is your daddy? Well, he's not doing too well. He's really struggling with both his mental health and physical health, as he is dead. Dave Hurley. We don't learn too much about Dave Hurley before his untimely demise, but we can surmise that Dave is a rich man as he's building a second house. But it's also clear that he is an unhappy man with an empty life. Dave tries to fill this void, and other voids, by picking up random hitchhikers and bringing them back to his house to fill some voids.
So tell me, how long have you been waiting by the side of the road?
A while.
Really? Well, lucky for you, I came along when I did.
Yeah, lucky me, huh?
Dave's also not the sharpest towel in the drawer, as he hired a fucking demolition company to build his house. Or is he secretly smart and in fact using the demolition company to launder his money? Think about it, who the fuck hires a demolition company to build their house? Unfortunately, we're only left with speculation, as Dave's story comes to an abrupt end. Mike. The enigmatic Mike.
Put your dick away, Walter.
Mike is a strange man who's showcasing strong signs of sociopathy.
You call me a fucking liar?
No.
Mike, as we learn, is a serial killer going from town to town who kills people, then assumes their identities.
And your name is?
I'm Dan. Demolition Dan.
Well, you take care of yourself, Dan.
Is Mike even his real name? The odds are no. Mike's motives are ambiguous, but it's clear that he has a thirst for blood. But he's also opportunistic, as once he hears that Dave wants his money back from Demolition Dan, he strikes. But it is hard to tell if it's the money he's after, or he's literally me and an agent of chaos. Mike's way of killing is rather interesting. We can see that he first lowers the victim's guard by playing dumb.
Nice tie.
Thanks. It's Versace.
Who?
And once their guard is down, he goes for the kill. Super slowly, because he's just that good at playing dumb. Yet after the deed is done, he maintains their previous conversation, as if nothing ever happened.
You know what, man? You were right. This tie does look good on me. Hold on. Don't worry. I'll get your money back for you.
Is Mike in denial of his actions? Does he assume Dave Hurley's identity, as he can no longer live with himself? I'm not sure. Mike might have a split personality, but he might also be a complete psycho who enjoys murder and man-ass. In my less than professional opinion, I'd call Mike slightly on the spectrum. Hans. Hans is a normal teenager who just turned 18 last week.
I turned 18 last week.
But his life and psyche is ruined by Demolition Dan in a scene too graphic to explain. This leads us to Hans seeking help.
I have to call the police. The demolition guy next door raped me. Ouch! My ass really hurts.
Listen, I'm a doctor. Why don't you drop your pants and let me take a look?
Now, whether or not this guy is a real doctor is up for discussion, but this shows us that seeking professional help helps.
Thank you, Dr. Rains, but it still hurts.
Then you'll have to come back tomorrow for a follow-up exam.
Okay.
And that was the psychology of every character in Demolition Daddy. I hope the video was insightful. And remember, just because it looks like somebody is fine on the outside, doesn't mean that they're all well on the inside. How's your daddy? Your Demolition Daddy? I don't know. Give him a call and find out. And as always, a big thanks to my Patreon supporters. You guys kick ass.
Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy?